Tonight on Free Minds TV, British drinkers being forced to queue up at the pub like they're standing in line at the post office. Also, a man facing possibly 20 years in jail for feeding the bears, and an article about public support for gun ownership. Coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV. It is episode 112. With you as always is Toby.
And Nick.
We have a ton to get into today. We will have some footage of the recent Freedom Fest held here in Keene, New Hampshire, as well as a lot of news from around the world. But you know, first we're going to start out tonight, Nick, talking about the nanny state in the UK. I know we have a couple stories every week that are just so ridiculous you can't really believe they're real news, but sometimes they are, and I wanted to start off pointing out some of the asinine things they're doing over in the UK. Let's start off first with what they're making pub goers do before they order a beverage of their choice. It looks like the UK nanny state is forcing people who want to drink at a pub to wait in a line similar to one like the post office, a queue. They're even bringing out the velvet ropes to show where people must stand in line. They're also having a 2-drink minimum when you purchase any alcohol beverages, so you must wait in this nice single file line when you order your drinks. Now they're doing this to curb drinking in the UK. They say that it's a lot of problem people drinking too much. So if you force them to wait in a queue, like a line, well, they won't be having as much fun. They might not drink as much. Bar owners and opponents of such legislation that is enacted and is going through argue that 40 bars and pubs are closing every single week in the UK, and they just can't afford more regulations that are going to hurt their industry. Now, Nick, I've got to know from you, do you think that this is a good idea to force people to wait in line like a queue when they order their beverages?
No, I mean, it'll probably just force people to drink at home or push them in that direction. They're going to take all the fun out of drinking at a pub or at a bar. And I want to point out that was actually, it was a 2-drink maximum. So you stand in line.
I said minimum.
Yeah, in a single file line for who knows how long, and a busy night in a bar, that can be a long time. And then that does away with the practice of buying a round for all your friends.
Well, they actually said that. They want people not to buy rounds for their friends. They want people to just be ordering 2 drinks for themselves, and then you drink them, and you must go and wait in the back of the line, and well, it just won't be as fun to go out drinking, so you're going to drink less and simply go home. I guess it's going to do exactly what the legislation is intended to do, cause people to frequent bars and pubs less often, and I guess cause more of them to shut down. Is that the goal? Their intended goal isn't to make bars get shut down, but I mean, 40 are closing every week, partially due to the restrictions, partially due to the economy, of course. But is further restrictions going to be good for the people? I say absolutely not. It's government intrusion, and it's nanny statism at its best here in the UK. I mean, telling people they need to wait in a line, a single-filed line, just like they're at the post office. Now, how much fun is had at the post office? I mean, personally, I kind of like the post office going and sending out packages. I have a soft spot. I know that Nick, you'll probably rail on me for it. But most people don't enjoy standing in a boring single file line when they're ordering their drinks. I mean, you go there to socialize and you're forced to stand in a single file line. How much fun are you really going to have? You're going to have your 2-drink minimum, and you don't want to go wait in that big old queue line, and you'll simply go home.
Yeah, and what it might drive people to do is actually drink before they get to the bar, because they're not going to want to wait to get their drinks over a period of time. So it could actually push people towards more binge drinking. That's certainly what we see with other people who are restricted or prohibited from drinking here in the U.S. You see teenagers and college students, often before a large social event, they can't drink in a bar or they can't drink at a sports game. So they drink a large amount beforehand, which can actually lead to a lot more problems. So I'm sure you'll see unintended consequences coming from this too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things they wanted to do is get rid of people buying rounds for all their friends. Why that's such a bad thing seems friendly thing to buy rounds for your friends, but in the UK, they're discouraging it. All right, we're not done with the UK. We got to pick on them a little bit more before we move on to stories from other parts of the world and here at home in the United States. This one not so serious, but pretty sad nevertheless. It looks like a preschool is being charged for having a picnic on the grass. Yes, a London local city council charged a preschool $185 to use a patch of grass right outside their school for their annual picnic event. The preschool, which is attended by kids as young as 2 and as old as 5, their event has been going on for 16 years. They've been frequenting the same patch of grass right outside their school, free of charge, and have never had any problems. But the city council says for public safety concerns, they need to have this payment of $185 was charged to them to make sure they didn't have any loud music playing or mess up the grass or do anything else those crazy preschoolers like to do when they have a crazy, crazy picnic right outside their school. I mean, to me this seems just redundant because, I mean, it's a public school being paid for by the taxpayers, and now the public school is having to give $185 of their school money to the government, which is going in a general fund, which is basically just bureaucrats passing around money and wasting. I don't know how much of this $185 is going to be wasted in the shuffle, but that's all they're doing is shuffling money around.
It keeps a lot of bean counters employed, and you'll see government programs doing this all the time. It's just
government's
just
charging each other money. But I mean, when a government's charging itself money, that's all you're doing is you're employing bean counters to shuffle the money about, and no real goods or services are being created. You're just charging one government fund and then putting it into another government fund and then eventually putting it back. And how much time was wasted? I mean, probably quite a lot. I mean, this $185, it's not a huge sum of money, but this is going on all the time, and it's redundant, it's a waste of money, it's employing needless bureaucrats, and, well, it's just giving these poor school officials needless headaches when they're told that their preschoolers are a public safety concern and need a down payment to have a little picnic party on their own patch of grass. Anyways, I know we have more important stories to move on to. Do have to move on. Some news from abroad. Some news, actually, we've been abroad, so let's move back here to the United States and focus on what some of the red staters are doing. We're talking about the right-wing Republicans. Now, we're not left-wing, we're not right-wing here, but when we have an issue, well, we've got to pick on them for it. And this is coming from redstate.com, which brings up the issue, what would Jesus do if he was faced with the question, should I torture someone to garnish useful information from them? Well, according to redstate.com, quote, it is likely that even Jesus would have okayed waterboarding if it would have saved his mom. He would have done the same for his dad or any one of his disciples.
Was his dad God?
His dad was God.
How could a terrorist be threatening God?
That is a good question. He said he would have waterboarded people to save all humans, except, of course, that poor man or woman who is being waterboarded. I guess Jesus wouldn't care for them because they're probably brown anyway. So wait, Jesus was brown. I don't know. I guess if you're white, Jesus likes you now. Anyways, it does bring up some interesting numbers. According to redstate.com, 54% of regular churchgoers, people who go to church and report going to church every week or at least almost every week, believe that torture against suspected terrorists is often or sometimes okay, versus only 42% of people who don't go to church or very seldomly attend church believe that it's okay. So there's quite the difference. I mean, you're talking 12-point difference for religious people thinking torture is okay versus non-religious people thinking it's okay. I mean, a majority of religious people who attend church regularly think it's okay to torture people versus those heathens think that you should not torture people because it's mean. So, is it okay to torture people if Jesus is on your side? I don't know. According to redstate.com, yes, in fact, it is. At least if it's white people.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out that a good percentage of people who go to church also object to torture. So it's not, I mean, there is a difference there, and it is pretty significant.
It's actually, it's a smaller percent, though. It's a larger majority. People who attend church, and it's not everybody. There are a lot of religious institutions that have condemned torture on all levels, but a majority of them believe that it's okay. 54% say it's okay or sometimes okay if it's justified. And what justifies torture? I'm really not sure. The redstate.com says that torture has saved millions of Americans from suspected terrorist attacks. I really haven't heard of a single one, but I guess he's got information that I simply do not. So, if Jesus gives you the okay to torture your neighbor, go for it. How do you get Jesus' okay for it? I'm not really sure. I guess you say Jesus would like this, as redstate.com did. All right, moving right along, we have a very important story to bring to our viewers who have recently become unemployed. The economy is crashing all around us, and, well, those unemployed people, they soon can pick up a little bit more than that unemployment check. Now, personally, I don't really like the unemployment scheme we have going on, but it is an insurance, so if you're picking up on the insurance claim, I mean, yeah, the government's running it and they do a bad job at it, but I mean, it is insurance, so I can't really down people too much if they lose their job and they paid into an insurance plan and they're using it. But here's something you don't have to feel guilty about, and that's brought to you by the pharmaceutical company Pfizer. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Pfizer? Anyways,
Pfizer. I think the P's silent.
it looks like, well, if your company has stiffed them, well, so will they. Anyways, I didn't make up that joke. One of our crew members did. It looks like Viagra is going to be free for the unemployed, along with over 70 other medications. Pfizer is giving it away to people who have been laid off as of January 1st, 2009. And if you've been taking a prescription for 3 months, you can apply and get one of those prescriptions for free. Viagra among the top of them. So, if you're unemployed, looking good for you. You can pick up your free Viagra prescription. That is, if you already had it.
Well, I mean, there are more useful medications. Like you said, there's 70 medications. Viagra's only
Viagra
one.
made the headlines, Nick.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Yeah, it did. But you know, I guess people have prescriptions for Viagra. Some people use it, so it's a.
I guess if you have nothing to do, you're unemployed, well, you have some fun in the bedroom. They'll help you out with that.
I don't know if that's the philosophy behind it or not. But
I think they're trying to perk people up in the worst of times. Get it? Anyways, we got to move on. We've got to get into the part of the show where we allow the viewers to let those fools in Washington know what's going on and what they should be doing about it. They probably won't listen to you, but you can hound them nevertheless, and we like to bring it to you each week with the Downsizer Disaptch. Nick, what's this week's?
Well, this week's Downsizer Disaptch is dealing with asset forfeiture. And asset forfeiture is basically a process in which law enforcement officials can seize your personal property, whether it's money or actual possessions, with very little suspicion. If a drug dog alerts on any money that you have in your house, on basically any piece of property, basically for any reason they want to make up to say that they believe it's connected to some kind of criminal activity, and then they seize it. And these police departments can use the money that they seize from you to fund their own operations. So it's a little bit different. In most cases, when they write traffic tickets and things like that, it doesn't go directly to that particular department. But it's also important to point out here that it contributes to police corruption. Just recently, a police officer in Tucson, Arizona, who ran that asset forfeiture program, was accused and convicted of stealing more than $560,000. And there's many, many other cases like this. And it's a very hard thing to catch because usually if an officer is going to steal money that's going to be seized as part of asset forfeiture, they do it before they get a count on it. And then they've only seized $20,000 instead of $30,000. So they take the $10,000 before the official count is done. And it's important to point out that if your money or other property is taken from you in this way, you're guilty until proven innocent, and the charges essentially go against the property. So you have to prove your innocence, as opposed to the police having any burden to go into a court of law and prove that that money or property was in any way connected to a crime, which is pretty much the opposite of how the American justice system was intended to work, and most Western justice systems don't work this way. And there is an effort to expand asset forfeiture in other countries as well. The United States is pressuring Mexico to adopt it in its fight against the drug cartels. And the World Bank and UN are pushing asset forfeiture all around the world. So you can go to downsizedc.org and tell your congresspeople that you would like to see asset forfeiture stopped, at least on the federal level, and you wouldn't like to see taxpayer dollars sent to encourage this program being expanded in countries like Mexico and others around the world. Again, downsizedc.org.
Should be pointed out that this program, I mean, it doesn't only affect people who are, say, drug users. It's also affecting, say, if you have a large amount of money and you're going to buy a car, well, they pull you over and they find, say, $6,000 in your car. They can seize that money, threaten you with a crime. We've read stories where they threaten to take your kids away from you if you don't sign over that piece of paper saying you give them their money. Then they'll drop the charges from you as soon as you give away your assets, and you're out all your money and there's nothing you can do about it. And so it's really insidious. I say we end it. It's disgusting, and well, it's not doing anything to end the war on drugs. I mean, you have to think outside the box to end the war on drugs. We're only vamping it up with our current policy. So go to downsizedc.org and tell the politicians, those useless drunks in Washington, what you think. Anyways, we do have to move on. It's time for us to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to be getting into the man who could be facing jail time for feeding a bear, as well as some news around from the United States about guns and some local video footage from this Springs Keene Freedom Fest, or Free Keene Fest. Anyways, we'll be back. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
Log on to freemindstv.com for archives of the show, the Free Minds Radio podcasts, show content and the forum, ways to donate, the members section, contact info, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com.
Hey, Ridley Report, Ridley here from RidleyReport.com, RidleyReport.com, at Ridleyography, I am the bomb. And I just want to tell you, you're watching FreeMindsTV.com, and they're like really cool, so you should keep watching them. FreeMindsTV.com, they are good.
And welcome back to the show. As always, it's Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, we have a new sponsor. We don't have them running during the break yet. We'll get them going up soon. But StashYourSwag.com is our new sponsor, and it gives you all sorts of neat hiding places where you can hide your valuables other than a safe that a thief could simply carry away. So if you want more information on that, visit StashYourSwag.com to learn more. Plenty of very useful tips for you to hide your valuables around your property. Anyways, we also want to invite the viewers to log on to our website. FreeMindsTV.com is the address. From there, there's also sorts of ways to help the show, as well as helping get us live on PorkFest. It's less than a month away, where we will be having a special show up at PorkFest in Gunstock. No, it's not Gunstock this year.
It's
Lancaster's Rogers Campground. We'll be there the 25th. If you're up there, we'll be shooting our show at about 6:30 p.m. We'll be on the schedule. If you're in New Hampshire for PorkFest, definitely check out the show. You might even want to be on it. We're going to be interviewing different guests and such. So, FreeMindsTV.com to learn more. Click on the PorkFest banner and you can get all the details. Anyways, it is time to move on. We've got a story about bears. Yes, it's not about bears eating people, it's about people feeding bears. And the authorities are very upset. This story coming from Anchorage, Alaska. Charlie Vendergaard, his love for bears has landed him in a whole lot of trouble. The man, Charlie, was featured on Animal Planet series called Stranger Among Bears, where he went out and he scratched the bears' bellies and he patted them behind the ears and he even fed one of them a cookie. Well, I guess he fed several of them a cookie because he's being charged with 20 counts of illegally feeding the bears. Now what's this? Is this a slap on the wrist? They're just going to let this poor man go? He says he's been feeding the bears for over 20 years. It's his way of life. He lives in Alaska and there's bears all around him and he kind of likes to hang out with them, kind of like you would a pet dog or something else. And he's had a relationship with bears and he feeds them. They come to his house, he gives them cookies and such. Well, the authorities say no more. Each one of his 20 counts he faces a year in jail for, as well as a $10,000 fine. That's 20 years in jail and a $200,000 fine that Mr. Charlie Vendergaard is facing for simply wanting to feed a bear. Now, I would say this. Probably not a best idea to feed a bear. They might rip your freaking face off. But, I mean, that's kind of a natural consequence for feeding the bears. If you're going to risk your life to feed a bear and you get your face ripped off, well, don't come crying to me. But I'm also not going to want to throw you in jail for 20 years for it.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that in Alaska they have a law against feeding the bears, they do in many places, the argument is that it's a danger to other people if you have neighbors. But the fact of the matter is the place where this individual was feeding the bears, he had to fly there. It was a remote cabin miles and miles away from Anchorage, and he didn't get there by road. It was miles and miles from the nearest road. So it's not like he was putting anybody else in jeopardy. It was just him. And I'm not going to say it was a very good idea either, but it's what he likes to do, and he's been doing it for 20 years, so apparently it's not that suicidal to feed the bears. So just let him keep feeding the bears at his secluded cabin. Who cares?
Or at least don't press charges on him and try to land him in jail for up to 20 years for this. I mean, it is ridiculous. Getting your face ripped off by a bear, well, that's going to be a natural consequence. You'll probably never feed a bear again. Anyways, we do got to move on. We've got other stories to get to. Nick, I believe you've got one about the state of guns and where the public's view of them are and how that fits in with the Second Amendment here in the United States.
Yes. Well, this new Gallup poll is showing that support for gun control is actually at an all-time low. The study was done back in October of 2008 and was just released in April of 2009. And only 29% of Americans now say that possession of a handgun by private citizens should be banned. And that might sound like quite a bit, but actually back in the early 1990s, up to 43% of people were saying that we should ban handgun possession for all private citizens. And people opposed to a ban like that has gone up from 53% of the population, just over half, to 69%, more than a supermajority. And it's also important to point out that the survey found that fewer than half of Americans, 49%, believe that gun laws should become more strict.
Well, that's some good news.
And it's this is a shift in public policy that's been taking place, not only on gun rights, but we have seen shifting attitudes on other issues, personal freedom issues. Marijuana decriminalization is now a position that's favored by a majority of people in the United States for the first time. Over half of people say that marijuana should be decriminalized. And we've also seen equal rights for homosexuals. That has, over the last few years, a relatively short few years, become a popular position instead of a minority position. So we've seen a general shift on these social issues towards more individual liberty. And it's a good thing for everybody. I mean, it means more freedom for everybody, whether it's something that matters particularly to you or not.
Absolutely. I know I went to the gun range last weekend with you. Actually, first time at the gun range. If you want to see the video of it, it's up on the members section, $3 a month or $30 a year if you want to see me out at the gun range shooting for the first time. But the guy said lots of new people signing up for the first time who haven't even shot guns before signing up. So it looks like the Second Amendment still very alive. All right, we've got one more story to get to before we leave you with some Freedom Fest footage. Nick, you've got a minute.
All right, well, bondsmen in Colorado, so basically bounty hunters, are upset by the fact that there are new policies in place at some of the local jails that are setting more people free without bail. Partly because of overcrowding and partly because of the financial crisis that's going on. Jails across the country are looking at diversion programs instead of jail time. And they're not actually, in many cases, setting bail for anybody who's being put into these pretrial programs, which has bounty hunters or bail bondsmen furious because there's fewer people they can drag back to court on some kind of a bond violation. So,
well, boo-hoo. You know, I know that we read a story about the Dutch on last week's edition of Free Minds Radio, and they said the great way to clear out the prisons are decriminalizing possession of small drugs. I mean, they're facing way too many prison cells because
empty
prison cells having to close down their prisons because they decriminalize drugs. Meanwhile, we can't build them fast enough because we're throwing innocent people behind bars. So I say, take all the nonviolent offenders, let them go. Anyways, we are out of time. We've got to leave the viewers with some footage from the Freedom Fest that went on last weekend in Keene, New Hampshire. You'll get the gist of it from the video. Anyways, until then, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night and log on to freemindstv.com for a whole lot more.
Free Minds TV is here at the Free Keene Fest, and there's a lot of events going on. There is a live band playing here. You've also got a number of outreach booths dealing with political topics like medical marijuana in New Hampshire, and there is a booth where you can write postcards to Sam Dodson of the Obscured Truth Network, who's still in jail at the moment. We've also just got people hanging out, socializing, and people off the street coming here, meeting activists, seeing what they're about. So let's take a look and see what's going on. So we're here with Mike Barsky. Mike, you're kind of the guy who put this whole event together. How much goes into getting an event like this?
Less than you might imagine, because most of the people around here, all the people at these tables, are really, really into volunteering and they want to get their message out. And so I say, hey, we're going to have the Free Keene Fest on this date, and 5 people jump, hey, I'll do this, hey, I'll bring a table, hey, I have tents you can borrow. So there's really all I had to do was like be the central place for information.
And so far this year, as far as I know, you haven't been harassed by the police department.
Not yet.
They just recently dropped the charges against you for a previous Freedom Fest that was held here. So it looks like they're going to leave the event alone.
What they did was drop the charges against me because in order to use the area here exclusively, you need a permit. And they said, well, we can't prove you used it exclusively. So that's why I was pretty confident they're not going to attack us this time. I even made a sign although I don't know where it is, that says, we're not using this thing exclusively. Feel free to use Railroad Square if you want. So I don't think they're going to come, but who knows?
Here we are at the Keene Freedom Festival. I'm Matt Simon, New Hampshire Coalition for Common Sense Marijuana Policy. And it's the beginning of summer. The legislature should be about done with most of its stuff. The medical marijuana bill has passed the House and Senate. Unfortunately, the governor has not signed it. He's instead said that he would veto it if it came to his desk the way it's written currently. So we're in kind of a strange legislative overtime. It's called a committee of conference, where 4 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate are going to try to work out a compromise bill that the governor won't veto, and hopefully that'll become the law of the land. The thing for people to do is call Governor Lynch's office at 271-2121, tell him that we support the medical marijuana bill, and get your friends to do the same.
Behind us, you can actually see a little bit of activism going on. Gambling is pretty well restricted in the state of New Hampshire, even if it's only a game of penny poker. And that's what the activists behind us are doing. They're playing a game for money, although granted it's mostly only for nickels and pennies. But that's still illegal. This went on at previous Freedom Fests, and it went on without incident, even though it was pretty well publicized. So they're just making a statement that, hey, if you want to gamble a little bit of your own money, you should be free to do that. Another act of civil disobedience going on behind us is the fact that food is being sold without any kind of a permit. This happens pretty frequently. It's not generally enforced very well, but the fact of the matter is you're still expected to get a permit to sell food in an event like this, which shows you just how far the nanny state has gone. And another one of the events going on here is that people can write postcards to Sam Dodson, Sam Miller, whatever you want to call him, who's still being held at the Cheshire County Jail because he won't give his full legal name. He was originally arrested for attempting to videotape here in the Keene District Court lobby, and he still hasn't been released or had a trial date set for him. There's still legal action pending. I know people have filed writs of habeas corpus, but so far they're still holding him essentially indefinitely without even giving him any kind of a court date. So for those who are interested, they can write Sam a postcard, let him know that they're out here thinking about him.
Beer Crash is an organization dedicated to putting out the message of liberty through whatever means necessary. They do a lot of grassroots activism, and they promote a lot of grassroots activism. And they're not some sort of top-down organization. They're from the bottom up. A lot of it's user influence. There are cells. There are, people all across the nation have their own little Beer Crash groups, and they go out and they do their activism, and they spread messages, and they hand out the Beer Crash Manifesto, which basically lays out the principles of liberty in very easy to understand terms.
Yeah, so that concludes our coverage of this Free Keene Festival, but there are going to be others in the future. Usually there's one in the spring and one more towards the fall. So if you're interested in attending this event and didn't know what was going on, if you're in the Keene area, keep your eyes posted because there'll probably be another event planned sometime this fall or the end of the summer.
Good enough.